Professionals and Coffee, a volunteer collective that boasts the professional profile of public relations practitioners through virtual coffee chats. My name is Carolina Salinas, and I'm the founder and project manager of Professionals and Coffee. And today I'm so excited to have Kate Dobrucki, VP Communications at Dentsu International. And this is our interviewer of Professionals and Coffee, Ankita Manek, an international student from the Public Relations Certificate from Seneca College. Welcome both of you to Professionals and Coffee. And now I will turn over the microphone. This is all yours, Ankita.
Thank you, Carolina. I'm going to give a brief introduction about Kate. Kate is a lifelong storyteller, and brands can count on Kate to get the point across and spread the word. An industry-leading VP, she has 15 years of experience across experiential, social, and digital landscapes in PR. She has executed award-winning campaigns for beloved brands like Nike, Lego, Stoli Vodka influencer parties, American Express private events, and the 2015 Pan Am Games. But her true passion comes through her mentorship and her championship for female empowerment. She has recently co-founded 2 women in business initiatives at dentsu, which we are very excited to know more about. Female Foundry, a mentorship and co-creation platform for Canadian female entrepreneurs. And the other is a podcast called Women Who, where she and a co-host Simran have conversation about women who challenge the status quo, women who ask for what they want, and women who hold the door open for other women. Kate, we are very excited to have you here. And here's the first question. What drew you to the field of communications?
Yes, great question. Thank you for having me. I'm so excited. I mean, you kind of said it at the beginning in part of my bio, right? I was, and I still am, an avid reader. I love stories. And reading as a child for me was a way to escape into other worlds, to experience other things, hear different points of views. And then I think from that, I started writing. And that's where I sort of found my voice. It gave me a voice. And so now I'm in the position where I get paid to write, share, and tell stories. So it's kind of a fantastic childhood dream that I just sort of continued and stumbled into.
And so since you have joined this industry, have there been any expectations that you have found that have differed from what you have perceived them to be, like in a good and a bad way? Like public relations has a reputation for having very long hours, or it's just for extroverts. Are these perceptions true, or is it completely different from what we know?
I mean, I think you've got a couple of great call-outs there. And I mean, the industry, I don't think that it's never necessarily changed since I've been in it for over 15 years. But I think the ways in which we communicate, the channels, the platforms on which we're communicating have changed, right? Like when I first started as a little PR intern, I was fax blasting a press release. You might not even know what a fax machine is, but like the way in which we now pitch to journalists or host events. I mean, even now, post-pandemic, we're hosting press junkets. I'm doing them virtually, right? With CEOs sitting in and joining a Zoom rather than flying on a plane. But I think what I will say is, and what's also sort of maintained the same is you get out of it what you put in, right? And working through different clients and at different agencies or with different teams and people, that gives you a lot of great perspectives, experiences, and it helps you sort of figure out what maybe you don't want to do rather than jumping into it and figuring out right away what you do want to do fresh out from school.
So my next question was going to be, have things changed since you started working? And is there something, in your opinion, you would have done differently?
Oh my gosh, we could spend the rest of the hour on this. And there's there's the good and the bad that I've done. I think I've had a lot of really great lessons in PR from mentors, from sponsors. And I would say when you first come out of school, go after those internships, go after the ones where you were really passionate about. When I went into school, I really wanted to work at a magazine after, and I did. And it was a hustle and it was a grind, and it wasn't necessarily doing the creative outlet that I thought it was. And so I landed at a PR shop, Fleischman Hillard, and I thought I wanted to get into pharmaceutical, big pharma, PR, joined that team, that practice, didn't love it. But because I was at an agency, I was able to pivot into other teams and raise my hand. Raising my hand and leaning in was an invaluable lesson. And I'm sure at first I got the butterflies and it was scary. And I couldn't believe I was on the CPG team all of a sudden with no CPG experience. But it was those that gave me the experience and sort of got to work with some of the top global brands that I did. Nike, American Express, working on a Pan Am game, just to name a few.
So, as a follow-up, how important do you think it is to experience different things rather than build expertise in one stream? Will that get you more ahead, like getting a niche for yourself, or do you just say, "Hey, I want to do films or events here, or I want to do this," and experience different things?
Yeah, I mean, being an accomplished generalist, which is sort of what I would frame myself as, has allowed me to pivot in different directions. Like if you look me up on LinkedIn, which I encourage you to, so that we can connect, you'll see that I've done a lot of different sort of pivots, right?
Right.
I started off in very traditional PR, and then I moved into client service. I got a job at a digital advertising agency. I knew nothing about digital, and I entered in as an account director. I mean, talk about imposter syndrome. The first week, I had to catch my breath and remind myself to breathe as I walked through the front door. And it's in those that you realize that all of your general experience on managing an event, on putting together a storyline, on pitching to a journalist, on developing a strategic vision, a comms plan, you can use those skills in absolutely any one of those jobs, and I have. But that's the direction I decided to go, right? I mean, that's all to say, if you do want to specialize into something, if you know, like I just didn't know who I was when I graduated at 21. I had no idea, right? And so I wouldn't change my journey for the world, but other people are maybe graduating at a different age, or they've had other lived experiences up to that graduation, and they know a little bit better on what they want to do. And then of course you can specialize in there.
And what advice would you give to somebody who is just going to graduate in this program in public relations? And how important do you think it is to have a mentor? Because you were just talking about having mentors.
It's critical. I mean, this is what I would say to you. When you're graduating, you're thinking of where you want to land. Think about brands that you support, right? Then look at their executive leadership team. I purposely chose agencies to work at, most of them, that had very senior women in leadership positions, because I knew that was not going to be then a barrier for me. I knew from the get-go that I was really ambitious and I wanted to work my way to the top, and I'm still on that ambitious climb, right? And I strategically picked agencies where I saw women who looked like me, so I knew that they would help mentor and support me. But I also, just as much as they were interviewing me, interview your future employer. Listen to the words that they say, listen to what they're not saying. Listen, make sure you meet with your manager, that you meet with maybe their peer. I have a lengthy interview process to come on to sort of my team, and it's built both ways. It's built so that we can gut check and make sure that you're right for the role, but it's more important for you, right? You get to meet with me, you get to meet with other leaders on the team, but then we also do peer get-togethers where you would get to have a coffee chat with two of the people who would be immediately your peers on the team. And it's a great way for you to say, okay, like Kate sounded great, but like what's she actually like? Right. And the team is encouraged to be honest and tell them like, oh my gosh, like sometimes we've got this one client and we work really long hours, right? Like I encourage them to be honest because there's times, I mean, we've talked about it, where you're doing some late nights, some overnights. But then other times I have a Friday afternoon off and I love going to the ROM or to the AGO and looking at the new exhibit. So I'm doing that, right? A different creative outlet. So that would be my recommendation is really look at the company you're looking at, look at the senior leadership, and then interview them as much as they're interviewing you and make sure it's a fit for you. And then mentors are critical. You can find those within the organization that you're in, and I encourage you to find them there because they can sort of help you hack the system, for lack of a better word, right? Like they know the other key stakeholders, they can help you more easily troubleshoot some blocks or boundaries that you're running up against. But then also find some mentors outside of your industry, because I find too, back to the beginning about different perspectives and different outlooks, I have some fantastic mentors that have only ever worked in healthcare. I've not worked in healthcare, but they're women and they have a fantastic outlook on different leadership styles, how to be your own champion, your own cheerleader. And they offer that sort of support. When I go into those, I want to raise conversations, they really sort of help pump you up too.
And since you were talking about the interview process at dentsu, is there anything particular that you look at for a fresh graduate? Because there are so many PR programs, right? Are there any soft skills, hard skills, or that you look at when you are hiring or you ask in interviews? Or is there anything that stands out in a prospective employee to you?
Yeah, I mean, I truly think a lot of skills can be taught, right? So I don't necessarily hang my hat on making sure you're like a PowerPoint or Excel whiz. I mean, if you can teach me a couple of things, then like amazing, love that. I'm always looking to learn and I'm by nature curious. But I will say I like to get to know you a little bit more as a human, because I think that helps sort of influence and it gives a different idea and flavor to the team, right? So making sure that you highlight hobbies that you might have, organizations that you're a part of, volunteer experience that you do, but then also integrating in different ways that you think or tackle or approach, right? And one of the things that we always do, I mean, it is a Marcom's function and practice that I'm leading. So we do writing samples. Because that is such a critical piece to the role. So I would always encourage you to practice your writing, different styles, corporate-y. We're not overly corporate-y, so incorporate, get comfortable with sort of a fun and energetic tone as well.
And coming to now, I want to ask you a bit about your career trajectory. So like you have studied event management, and I'm very interested to know how has that changed, and has that the role of events changed, especially because of the pandemic, since there's so much virtual working now.
Yeah, I mean, talk about doing something that I wasn't formally trained at, right? Like, and that, like, let's even go back a step further. Before I went to Niagara College for event management, I was at Western and I specialized in warfare.
Yeah.
Like talk about like, I went into a course where I got to write, right? It goes back to, I love writing. And so yeah, coming out of that, I did a bunch of events and I've done some pretty badass events, especially working with American Express. There was one with, we did a private concert with John Legend, and we got to like, when we did the Centurion events, we got to close down like Tiffany and all sorts of crazy things with Stoli vodka. We had like helicopters landing in New York City on different rooftops and throwing these like parties. It was so much fun. With Coca-Cola, we did this FIFA World Cup trophy tour. Like, it's been amazing. And hey, I can work with the best of you on how to most efficiently pack a 747 plane. But it's all to say, again, those sorts of skills morphed into PR, in that, again, I had to like encourage people and rally a team, build a community, and bring the energy. And now, I mean, it's exponentially changed events. And now a lot of them are hybrid. I mean, right now our organization is sponsoring a big marketing event in Canada. It's called DX3, and they decided to go stay virtual, right? So we're still not in person. We're not even doing that hybrid. And it's been interesting. I was super skeptical at first, but the platforms that a lot of these organizations are using. So again, like, be curious, learn about these platforms, because I think that's just an invaluable school you can take in. I mean, I remember when we first went into work from home, we used Teams as an organization, and I was YouTubing how to host a Teams live, how to host a Teams meeting, right? Like, up until that point, we were using it more for a chat, a DM sort of capability. And overnight, it was like, okay, now we have to create an entire Dentsu Canada channel. And how are we going to communicate to teams? And I mean, at the start of the pandemic, news and updates were changing weekly, right? And so I would say, like, learn how these different platforms work, and stay curious and do some research. Volunteer too. I mean, all of these places, I did a lot of volunteering when I first started. The Gourmet Food and Wine Expo in Toronto used to be a huge in-person event when I was interning, and I interned there. I worked at like the ticket kiosk, and just watching and getting to see different ways in which a show manager would put on an event was really interesting. And then you get to network and meet them, right? And so then that led to other volunteer positions. Then I interned there, and then I got a job there. And that was my first job in publishing. So yeah, I'd say volunteer too, because it's a great way to sort of watch and see how it all unravels.
And do you think the role of event management or events has completely reduced because it's virtual, or it's more important to learn just new tools to understand how to do virtual events?
I think humans by nature love connecting. And so I do think that we might be in a little bit of a pivot. I use that word a ton. That's apparently my word of 2022. But I don't think that they'll go away forever. I think people really want to get back to them. I mean, concert sales, sporting event sales, you see it, right? People are looking to get back together and being amongst each other. So I wouldn't worry if you're looking to get into events. I think they'll be on the rebound.
And as somebody who's joined a leadership role in 2020, you led like a team through something that was a major change. Could you tell us what that was like as a public relation team manager? Like, how has public relations changed? How did working change for you?
Yeah, that is a great question. And there was actually a really positive result. So when I first took the position, I accepted the role in January of 2022. And the CEO, Jeff Greenspoon, said, it's going to be so much fun. It's going to be a wild ride. Little did the two of us know, right? And a couple of months later. And what I will say about communications is that I had a fantastic seat at the table, at the executive table, right? Jeff has been a fantastic ally and sponsor of me and my career. But I will say, I think there were others on the executive team who weren't skeptical of me and my capabilities, but skeptical of like comms in general, right? And how is comms really that strategic? Don't you just like write some emails to the teams and organize some annual conferences, right? And really quickly when the pandemic hit and the importance on communications and communicating clearly and effectively and concisely and consistently, for that matter, I think they quickly realized it was a humbling experience for them because they didn't want to say the wrong thing, right? And it started with the pandemic, and then we went into social injustices, and now with other world events that are going on, executives and organizations need to constantly communicate some really serious world events, but also community events that take place in their communities. And so I think what's happened in a lot of organizations is that communications and communications executives have a much more strategic role to play and a much louder voice, which is fantastic.
Now coming to my favorite part, can you tell us more about your podcast and like Female Foundry?
Okay, this is something I could go on, and I need to have you on so that you can come on our podcast. But what I will say is this was actually a development of the pandemic. Women Who started a couple of years ago. We did an event. I hosted an event in partnership with Google. It's called I Am Remarkable. And I was tasked with leading a workshop. There was all these women in the room, women around dentsu, and you had to finish the sentence, I am remarkable because. And it was difficult. You had to focus on accomplishments. You couldn't use attributes or frivolous words like I am curious or I am compassionate. Like you had to focus on accomplishments. And it was all grounded in the fact that it's not bragging if it's true. And I had such a difficult time finishing the sentence. And I was a VP at a brand at the time. I was very accomplished and I was mentoring others. And I thought, you know what, if I'm having a difficult time flexing this accomplishment muscle, there's other women in this organization who are, and we just need to practice. We need to practice more. We need to get together and practice. And so Women Who at Dentsu was founded on that sort of grassroots principle that we need to be having more authentic and candid conversations. We need to get, as women leaders, more vulnerable so that as younger women are coming up, they're realizing that their initial thoughts or feelings, they're not alone in that, right? That we had that too. We constantly work through that. And so we were having some fantastic internal events, and we partnered with some female-founded companies. And when the pandemic hit, we realized that once again, women were disproportionately affected by this pandemic in that a lot of the at-home social and family responsibilities were falling on their plate too, right? So not only did you have these ambitious women trying to balance and juggle this career, their badass career, now they were homeschooling and they were chef and they were therapists to everyone, and it was a lot. And so we realized that the last thing they wanted to do was join a Zoom conversation. So we pivoted to a podcast. We had these conversations over podcasts so that you could listen when you were maybe going on a walk or making dinner, right? And so we tried to make it as accessible as possible so that we could continue those important conversations that we really think are important to have in developing those accomplishment muscles to push women to forward, to pull them up with us, and to actually make an impact.
I've heard your podcast, and one of the themes is like youth women helping other women. Do you think that happens enough in the public relations industry here? Because it is very competitive. It is very cutthroat.
Yeah. It can be cutthroat. And I think that is where, when you interview at an agency or on a team, you just need to trust and ask those sorts of questions to gauge that, right? I mean, I work in public relations, and we don't stand for that on the team, right? I think, selfishly, as an executive on the team, I look way better if the team is doing better, right? Like that is a KPI in which I am benchmarked against. And I will say, I think that's been an important change in the industry too, is that more executives are benchmarked on the success of their team. And that has started to change that perception. I mean, there's always going to be good eggs and fantastic eggs and bad eggs. And that's where you just have to trust your gut and not work with those bad eggs.
Okay. Thank you, Kate, for your time and for this insightful conversation. It was really helpful.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Thank you, Kate, for your guidance. Ankita, you did an excellent interview. Congratulations. And there are any social media handles that both of you would like to share? Where can we find you?
I'm super easy to find. Just look up my first and last name on LinkedIn or Instagram, and you'll find me in both places.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Kate. And what about you, Ankita?
You can follow me on Twitter at Anki_VM and on LinkedIn at Ankita Manik. Same first name, last name.
Okay, well, thank you, everyone, and see you on the next Professionals and Coffee Chat. Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel and social media handles, which are in the description below this video. And please join us to do your own coffee chat like Ankita just did today. Thank you, and bye-bye.